That's a very, very wide field, I can tell you that. Actually, generative AI to HR has been a bit of a latecomer. The first places were sales, marketing, customer service, and so on and so forth. But to come to HR, it's taken a bit of time. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of sensitive data involved. So how do you actually bring generative AI, the entire knowledge of the World Wide Web, to bear context towards your specific employee data and be able to help them, is exactly where generative AI is. We're now seeing some systems come out, and we've just launched our generative AI-led HRMS, and that's really what we're here for. Generative AI in HR is no different from generative AI in any other field, right? You've got a context of your own company. You've got the World Wide Web's information and the knowledge that is there with the entire internet. How do you bring a bridge between your context and that information so that you can actually add on to that or do better using that information? You don't have information directly right now with you about everything. But with generative AI, you can actually build that bridge and bring that context in for your company and your employees and your managers and your CHROs. That's really what generative AI is. So in every single spectrum of the HR tech space, generative AI has a role to play. That really depends on the LLM that you're using, the large language model that you're using, right? Some large language models have been trained on to, for example, not go towards personal information. Some have been trained, and I was using one day before yesterday to generate an image of a person, a specific person. They said, no, we cannot do that because that's a block that's been put towards LLM. However, there are some which are completely open, so you could potentially end up using generative AI for wrong purposes as well. It's being controlled at the absolute base level. But the reality is that it's going to be very hard to control over there. The good thing about HR is because it's being run inside the context of a company, you cannot possibly be completely free to do whatever you want. You don't have that freedom. You do have that freedom when you're talking directly to ChatGPT. You don't have that freedom when you're doing it inside the generative AI capability of an HR system. To be able to directly answer that question, let me just take a couple of steps back. Generative AI is actually going to take your context. Let's say there's a 10,000 people company. It has got 31% females, women, and 69% other genders. Now, you could potentially say there is a bias about that, but it's just going to give you the data that exists. What you're going to ask is, the bias is actually in our mind. Are we going to ask the right question? For example, are we going to ask the question around gender pay parity? Generative AI will give you the answer. Do you really want to get the answer is the big question, right? So I don't think that the bias exists at the technology level. The bias exists in the execution of that technology, right? How you're going to execute it is up to you. But the world is literally a white slate. So you could potentially be asking anything and getting all types of answers. Are you ready for it? That's the key question. So this is the first time that we're bringing it to the GCC. We're already using it in other parts of the world. And it's been absolutely amazing. So companies have been able to reduce attrition. Companies have been able to smoothen the onboarding. Companies have been able to retain talent. Companies have been able to give their employees the best use cases of how they themselves can actually grow themselves, give them a bit of a transparent way of saying, hey, I can do this as well as that, and be able to then sort of dive into that. Companies have been able to solve for all the queries that come, the transactional queries that come, all through generative AI. Even things like creating JDs or matching positions to specific type of job roles as well as CVs, you can do through Gen AI. There are many facets that are coming up with Gen AI, and we're seeing more and more of it. I think for the GCC, what is going to be important is the whole talent side of it, which is why we focus much more on the talent over here. Over here, what we realize is almost nobody has a problem at the core. Everybody wants best talent, and it's a very transient talent, as you know, in the GCC. So we want to make sure that whatever talent you do get, you're able to utilize to the best possible, and the talent itself is retained by you using Gen AI.